So we found evidence that men's brains do change across the transition to parenthood. They're remodeled in a way that actually looks similar to what you see in moms. So it tells us it's not just about pregnancy hormones, it's also about caregiving, time, and investment.
This is Lightbulb Moments by USC, a podcast that captures moments of brilliance across campus at the University of Southern California. I'm Jessica Peretta from University Communications. Today, we're talking with Darby Saxby, one of the bright minds here at USC conducting landmark research. She discusses how parenthood and family ties change our brains. Her work explores the psychological, behavioral, and hormonal changes of our brains as we go through parenthood and the challenges conducting this research.
I am a professor of psychology at USC. I am also the director of our clinical training PhD program within the Department of Psychology, and I run the USC Center for the Changing Family. And I study families and close relationships across the lifespan and how the brain and body are transformed by care and by parenting.
What drew you to this particular field of study?
I feel like I was always drawn to doing work that felt personally meaningful. And so part of what motivated me to shift to psychology was feeling like, especially as a clinical psychologist, I can make a real difference to people's lives beyond just kind of the ivory tower. So I've always been interested, even as an English major, now as a psychologist, in the use of narrative and language and the way that we tell stories to make meaning out of our experiences. And I've also always been interested in the power of personal relationships and the idea that close relationships are both our biggest source of conflict and stress, but are also really important buffers that kind of protect us from the kind of ups and downs of the world. So thinking about how relationships play out, not just kind of in our psychological well-being, but actually our physical health is also really interesting to me. And I like to remember that as humans, we're essentially animals. We're primates. So our hormones or the patterns that our brain make can give us clues to what's kind of going on under the surface that we may not even be consciously aware of and able to share in words.
So what research project has meant the most to you so far?
It's kind of the dream study that I always wanted to get off the ground. And it was to try to understand what's really changing for people over the transition to parenthood. So we recruited first-time expectant parents into the lab, cohabiting couples, and we had them do some discussions with each other. I was really interested in how they interacted. We sampled their hormones. We had them fill out a whole bunch of questionnaires about how they were doing, how they were feeling about the baby. And then we scanned the men's brains. And then we did it all again after the baby was born. So when the baby was 6 months old, they came back to the lab and they did the same visit. And a couple of things that have come out of that. So that project is still going. We actually just got a grant to do a 7-year follow-up. So we're now bringing the kids back who are first and second graders that we originally recruited as parents.
And what were the biggest insights from this work?
One thing I'm excited about that we've just been publishing papers from in the last couple of years is the fathering brain piece. And so we found evidence that men's brains do change across the transition to parenthood. They're remodeled in a way that actually looks similar to what you see in moms. So kind of suggesting that there isn't just like an innate kind of remodeling that mothers experience that fathers don't. There's this kind of like overall pattern in the brain that we can pick up on in both dads and in moms, which I think is really interesting because dads don't experience pregnancy. So it tells us it's not just about pregnancy hormones, it's also about caregiving, time, and investment. And I'm working right now on a project that's just linking up the brain change in our men with their mental health, with their sleep, with their relationships with their babies. And I'm finding that when dads show more brain change, they report closer relationships with their babies and they spend more time with their babies. But they are also sleeping less and they're more depressed. So I think of that as kind of like the cost of caregiving. And I think I want to kind of like dig into that more to try to figure out what is happening for the men, and are there going to be signs of rebound, and how is the brain changing now that we're getting the 7-year data? How are the men that maybe showed the most brain remodeling going to be faring with their kids as they kind of move through fatherhood?
Was it difficult to get this study up and running?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think the ramp up to getting the study off the ground was a lot of time, stress. I myself had really young kids at the same time that I was starting my lab. So I was sleep deprived. Like, I was going through all the same experiences as the parents that I was following. But in 2019, two really good things happened. One good thing was I got tenure. So that was a huge relief and just really delightful. And I also got a Fulbright fellowship to go to Spain, which was wonderful because I got to eat a lot of Spanish food. I got to hang out by the beach. I got to live in a really cool city, Barcelona. But I also teamed up with these researchers who had done kind of the landmark work on moms' brains and looking at brain change in women. And they had a small sample of dads who they had also followed over the same time period. And so we combined their data with my data collected at USC. And the light bulb was that when we looked at the brains together, we saw change in some of the same regions. So again, suggesting that there's really something happening for men that isn't just about pregnancy, it's not just restricted to women, and that across 2 international samples, we were finding converging results. That was when I really started feeling like we're onto something big.
What made you think to study the mind of the father specifically?
You really sort of have to fix the parents before you can improve things for the kid. And I figured, why not start at the very beginning, right when a baby's born or even before, if you want to find those windows for intervention to try to kind of help get the parents on the right trajectory. And in particular with studying fathers, a lot of kids in the US live in households without dads or have dads who aren't as involved. And there's some evidence that a lot of that pulling away starts in infancy. So I wanted to really look at men before and after they became parents to try to find out kind of what are the inflection points that might tell us something about which fathers are motivated to engage in parenting, and kind of like what are the implications of that for men and for men's health. And what I really want to do is kind of encourage a conversation about the value of care and connection, and to not just think of care as something that women do. It's something that men do, and that men can be transformed by it in the same ways that women are. And I think the more we can elevate the role of men as caregivers, the more we can shed light on policies like paternity leave or paid family leave across the board, or workplace policies that allow men to take time off from work. And those kinds of policies, they're evidence that they're not just good for men, they're good for the kids, they're good for the partners. So I think across the board, that's a place where I feel like really good research can help to move the needle.
What do you think is the big change in your field moving forward?
There hasn't traditionally been a lot of sort of grant funding available for studying parents, and particularly fathers. And I think it's because parenthood is not a disease. And so it's not like National Institutes of Cancer, National Institutes of Heart Disease. It's also not, like I was saying, it's not always recognized as a developmental stage. So it tends to get a little bit left out in the cold, but I think more attention to importance of working with parents is going to shift that. In terms of just more generally, what I think is good that's happening in the field is more transparency around data sharing. So what's called kind of the open science movement has encouraged researchers to share their raw data, share their code and their analyses, pre-register projects before they do them. So it's not the case that you're doing a study and then you pick out just the best results and publish them. It's that you're registering your plan before you start, so that then you're committed to reporting everything that you find. Also team science, so larger scale projects where different teams are working independently on the same questions. I think work like that has the potential to just really improve the rigor and the reproducibility of what our field is doing. And I'm excited to contribute to it.
Thank you for listening to Lightbulb Moments by USC. You can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever else podcasts are found.